If you are watching this on March 19th, 2026, you need to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what is happening between Iran and Israel at this very moment is not just another round of Middle Eastern tension that the world has grown numb to over the decades. This is something categorically different. This is a full-scale war, now entering its third week, with missiles striking Tel Aviv, cluster bombs raining down on residential neighborhoods, American service members dying across the region, and a conflict that began on February 28th and has already reshaped the geopolitical map of the entire Middle East in ways that no analyst fully predicted. And the attack on Tel Aviv that you are about to hear the full story of is not the beginning of this crisis. It is one of the most dramatic escalation points inside a war that is already burning. Strap in, because this is far more complex and far more dangerous than any single headline has managed to capture. To understand what happened over Tel Aviv, you first need to understand the full context of what triggered it. This war began on February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel launched coordinated military strikes against Iran, following the collapse of diplomatic talks and negotiations between Washington and Tehran. That first wave of American and Israeli strikes hit multiple locations inside Iran simultaneously. The logic from Washington and Jerusalem was clear: destroy Iran's ability to threaten the region, degrade its nuclear program, and force a change in the fundamental equation of Middle Eastern security. What followed instead was something that former State Department officials are now describing in blunt terms. One former senior negotiator told CNN that the United States had misjudged Iran's response to those opening strikes, and the events of the past 19 days have proven that assessment devastatingly accurate. Iran responded not with symbolic gestures, but with an extraordinary campaign of ballistic missile and drone attacks launched at Israel and at American military installations spread across the entire region. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps says it has launched attacks on at least 27 bases in the Middle East where American troops are deployed, as well as Israeli military facilities in Tel Aviv and other parts of the country. Think about that number for a moment. 27 military bases. From Bahrain to Qatar to Kuwait to Iraq, Iranian missiles and drones have been reaching across the region in a show of retaliatory force that has pulled multiple countries into the blast radius of this conflict, whether they wanted to be or not. U.S. CENTCOM has confirmed 13 American service member fatalities from Iranian attacks across the region, and that number does not include those wounded or those lost to crashes and accidents directly tied to the conflict operations. 6 American airmen were killed when a refueling aircraft crashed in western Iraq. Their dignified transfer was held at Dover Air Force Base this week without television cameras. The human cost of this war is real, and it is growing. Now let us talk about what happened in Tel Aviv, because this is where the story becomes both deeply personal and deeply terrifying for anyone who understands what these weapons actually do. Iran fired what it described as revenge cluster missiles at central Israel overnight on March 18th, using multiple warhead systems specifically engineered to overwhelm defensive interceptor systems. These are not the ballistic missiles you picture when you imagine a single warhead arcing through the sky. Cluster munitions release dozens of individual bomblets across a wide area, turning a single missile into a weapon that can spread destruction across an entire city block in ways that a standard interceptor was never designed to stop. CBS News cameras and correspondents on the ground in Tel Aviv described these bomblets as looking like comets streaking through the night sky before raining down across the city. For the people on the ground watching that happen above their heads, there are no words adequate to describe what that experience must have felt like. The attack killed a man and a woman in their apartment in Ramat Gan, a suburb of Tel Aviv, and caused significant damage in other parts of central Israel, including a train station in Tel Aviv. Two people in their 70s found just outside their safe room. That detail matters. It matters because it tells you something critical about the nature of these weapons and the limits of even the most sophisticated civil defense systems. Israel has built an extraordinary network of reinforced security rooms known by the Hebrew acronym Mamad, designed with concrete walls capable of withstanding blast and shrapnel from conventional weapons, with blast-resistant steel doors and windows. The Israeli Home Front Command created an app that alerts residents to incoming missiles with as much as 10 minutes of warning before projected impact. The civil defense system is among the most sophisticated in the world, and two elderly residents still did not make it to safety in time. That is the terrifying reality of cluster munitions fired at a dense urban area. The math of survival changes completely. The Iranian military's framing of the strike was, as it always is, one of precision and strategic success. Iranian commanders described the operation as carefully targeted at Israeli military command infrastructure, communication hubs, and facilities linked to intelligence operations. They claimed the attack was surgical, not aimed at civilians, but at what they called strategic nodes within Israel's security architecture. They claimed it proved that no part of Israel was beyond the reach of Iranian firepower. These claims serve a purpose that goes beyond describing physical damage. They serve Iran's domestic audience, which has been living under an unprecedented bombardment. Health authorities have reported approximately 1,300 people killed in Iran since the war began on February 28th. When your country is being struck at that scale, the government needs to demonstrate to its own population that it is hitting back, that the pain is being shared, that the adversary is also bleeding. The propaganda value of a missile striking Tel Aviv is enormous, regardless of the actual physical damage it causes. Israel's account of the same events told a starkly different story, as it always does. And understanding the gap between these two narratives is itself one of the most important things you can do to understand how this war is actually being fought. Israeli defense officials acknowledged that missiles had been launched, that air raid sirens had sounded across the city, and that their multi-layered air defense systems had been engaged. They maintained that the majority of incoming missiles were intercepted, that critical infrastructure remained intact and operational, and that emergency response teams had brought the situation under control effectively. The Israeli military has insisted it is not running critically low on air defense interceptors, saying it is prepared and ready to handle any scenario, even as international reports have repeatedly raised questions about the sustainability of interceptor stockpiles over a prolonged campaign. Defense officials told CBS News that if it were not for Israel's air defense and early warning systems, the death toll would likely be dramatically higher, with 14 people killed by Iranian attacks in Israel so far across the full course of the war. Both of those narratives are simultaneously true and strategically shaped. Iran needs the world to believe it is capable of penetrating Israel's defenses and striking at will. Israel needs the world, and more importantly its own population, to maintain confidence in the systems that are the difference between a survivable conflict and a catastrophic one. The information war being waged alongside the physical one is just as consequential, because perception shapes behavior, and behavior shapes escalation. Every government watching this conflict is making decisions based on what they believe about the actual military capabilities on both sides. When the two sides tell opposite stories about the same strike, the rest of the world has to navigate that uncertainty in real time. The largest single death toll from an Iranian strike so far came on March 1st when a ballistic missile hit a residential neighborhood in Beit Shemesh and killed 9 civilians. That strike also demonstrated something that defense planners in every major military are now studying with intense focus. At least 2 interceptors had been launched against that missile, yet it still achieved a direct hit on a communal shelter in a synagogue, showing that even reinforced shelters could be vulnerable under extreme circumstances. That is not a failure of will or preparation. That is the statistical reality of missile defense. No system intercepts 100% of incoming threats 100% of the time. And when the weapon that gets through lands on a shelter full of civilians who followed every instruction, the consequences are catastrophic and irreversible. The broader strategic picture surrounding Tel Aviv during this conflict is one that military analysts are struggling to fully process in real time. The IDF has said it still has thousands of targets to hit across Iran, with new ones identified every day, with a military spokesman stating that the operation had been planned months in advance, accounting for Tehran's full stock of ballistic missiles and drones. Israel has been striking Iranian military commanders, intelligence officials, and nuclear-related infrastructure with a systematic intensity that has already resulted in the deaths of multiple senior Iranian figures. Iran confirmed the death of Intelligence Minister Esmail Khatib, the 3rd senior Iranian official killed by Israel in roughly 24 hours, with thousands of mourners gathering in Tehran for the funerals of multiple leaders killed in a single day. The assassination campaign being conducted alongside the conventional strikes represents a deliberate strategy of decapitation, targeting the institutional brain of the Iranian military and intelligence apparatus. The economic dimensions of what is happening are beginning to ripple outward in ways that will eventually touch every person watching this video, regardless of where they live. Iran has moved to block the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply passes. And most NATO allies have declined Trump's request to help provide military safe passage for shipping through the strait. Trump's response to those allies refusing to help was characteristically direct, stating that the United States does not need their help and will handle the situation unilaterally. The Federal Reserve meeting this week left interest rates unchanged, while acknowledging that the war's economic impact remains unclear, with energy prices already spiking and inflation risks rising as a direct result of the conflict. When a war in the Middle East starts showing up in Federal Reserve policy statements, you know its reach has extended well beyond the borders of the countries doing the fighting. Ben Gurion Airport has been effectively shut down, with Dubai-based Fly Dubai suspending all flights to and from Tel Aviv through April 30th, joining a long list of international carriers that have pulled out of Israeli airspace entirely since the war began. Thousands of foreign nationals, including American citizens, have been stranded inside Israel since late February. Israel's flag carrier, El Al, has begun operating special non-stop flights specifically for stranded American citizens, working with the U.S. State Department to get them home, while Israeli civilians continue living with the daily reality of missile alerts, reinforced shelter rooms, and the knowledge that the sky above their country is contested territory. The human dimension of this conflict, the one that never fully fits inside a policy briefing or a geopolitical analysis, is the one that should sit with you longest after this video ends. More than 1,300 Iranians killed, more than 900 Lebanese killed, 16 Israelis killed, 13 American service members killed. Deaths recorded in Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE, Saudi Arabia. A 29-year-old woman killed in her residential building in Manama. Children counted among the dead in Lebanon. An elderly couple found outside their safe room in Ramat Gan. Workers struck outdoors at a construction site in Yehud because they had no shelter to reach in time. These are not statistics. These are the irreversible consequences of decisions made by governments in Washington, Jerusalem, and Tehran that will shape this region for a generation. The missiles falling on Tel Aviv and the missiles falling on Tehran are both falling on human beings who did not choose to be in the middle of any of this. What happens next is genuinely unknown. Senior Israeli officials reportedly told American diplomats that Iran's regime is not cracking, is willing to fight to the end, and that its Revolutionary Guard has the upper hand internally. Yet Israel says it has thousands of targets left to strike and a plan prepared for a war that could last several more weeks. The United States is flying strike missions, losing service members, watching an aircraft carrier pull into port after a fire on board, and presiding over a conflict whose endpoint is not yet visible. The world is watching Tel Aviv's night sky light up with cluster munitions and calling for restraint. Whether those calls reach anyone in a position to act on them on this March 19th of 2026 is the question that everything else depends on. We are watching. We will keep watching. Stay informed. The world cannot afford for you not to be.